Okay, we are now going to look at the seventh appearance. Remember, Jesus has appeared 6 times so far that we've read about. The first was to whom and on what was the occasion? Number one, Mary Magdalene, and where was she? At the tomb. Okay, and the second appearance, the other women, right, on their way to the tomb. Okay, third was pick up Peter. Was Peter. What do we know about that? What was remarkable about that? We don't know anything about it. Okay, for whatever reason, God chose not to reveal that to us, and that's fine. But we know that that definitely did occur, and both Luke and the Apostle Paul um, wrote about that to confirm that. The fourth appearance then would have been Cleopas and his companion, right? His friend, his companion. They were on their way to where? Traveling to Emmaus. Okay, and where is Emmaus located? About 7 miles from Jerusalem. Okay, so and that's only important when you think about what you know after it was confirmed to them that they had seen Jesus, and Jesus, of course, they immediately returned back to Jerusalem. So they had to go. They went quickly the 7 miles back to Jerusalem and found the apostles, found the disciples as well as the apostles. Okay, and then the fifth appearance, actually the fifth and the sixth, were to the apostles, right? First time without Thomas, second time with Thomas. Now, remember the first 5 appearances was on the day of the resurrection. Okay, so we're still on Sunday with them. Okay, and the second appearance to the apostles with Thomas was about 8 days later. Um, and whether they were in the upper room, had returned to the upper room or not, the point is that they were all gathered together, just as Jesus had asked them to be. Uh, it occurred to me at some point, I don't know whether it was Sunday or Monday or whatever, that I think in response to John's question, we, when he John Peterson about not knowing how the other apostle got there, whatever, and the reference to the 11, even though there were only 10 of them there, because the first time, because Thomas was not there. So that would have been just 10 of them there. But the expression, and I said, well, later on they casted lots, and I think I kept saying Thomas when in fact it was Matthias, okay, that became the 12th the 12th apostle, and that's in Acts second chapter. But the point being is that the expression the 11 was a common expression used to refer to the apostles, even though all of them may not have been assembled together. So that was just an expression that is used in the Bible that oftentimes refers specifically to the apostles and not just to disciples in general. And so the fifth time the apostles were gathered without Thomas being there. Why he wasn't there, we're not sure. He just wasn't there. But then the second time, 8 days later, um, uh, Thomas was there, and of course Thomas's point about wanting to wanting to experience the same thing that the other apostles wanted, so that he could also know that it was Jesus. And in fact, he did experience the same things. He got to see and touch Jesus' hands, feet, and his side. So all the apostles, even though they were still struggling with their belief at the time, nevertheless they did finally get to assure themselves that in fact Jesus was. But it was really the most convincing part. What was the most convincing part of it for the apostles, though? what actually, as we say, sealed the deal in terms of them knowing that Jesus had in fact returned in human. He was hungry, and so he had a meal with them. Okay, that was it. The Bible says that was what finally convinced them that it truly was Jesus. Okay, so the last appearance that we talked about, of course, was apparently for Thomas's sake, since he missed out on the first appearance of the apostles. Now, today, we're going to look at um, Jesus appearing to the disciples in Galilee, and this one is going to appear to be for the sake of Peter, because it's going to be now we are going to get some detail about the discourse, the discussion between the Savior um, and Peter. So the setting, of course, is the Sea of Galilee or the Sea of Tiberias. John 6:1 says that that's the same sea. And the timing of it, we're not exactly sure, except that John 21:1 says that after these things. Now, that could mean, of course, his most recent appearances, or it could have been talking about the other events that had taken place. But nevertheless, this appears to be related to the things that had just occurred. And since we know that the apostles were gathered, including Thomas this time, there in Galilee, then this appearance would also be at that time and in this place. And this time he appears to how many of the disciples? How many of the apostles? At least how many? How many were actually named? 7. Okay, so at least there were seven disciples that were named. Now, one name was a little bit different than what we'd seen in the past, because there was a new name that was introduced to us, and that's Nathaniel. And it appears from when you put all the accounts of the naming of the apostles together that Nathaniel was another name for Bartholomew. And so Nathaniel and Bartholomew being the same person in terms of the apostles. Now, what were they doing? Fishing, right? Out on the sea, and they were fishing. Why was it that Peter wanted to go with them, do you think? I mean, yes, he's a fisherman, but he wasn't in the initial party, so to speak. He asked to go along, okay? What was the possibilities? The possibilities was that he was contemplating returning to his old profession, okay? And so there was some concern that he was going to abandon his apostleship and go back to his original profession. It's interesting also to note that that could have been a concern on the part of all of those that went back to fishing, because it could be that if they'd had great success at fishing, they might have decided, well, maybe I should be doing this instead. But the point was that how successful were they? Caught nothing. Now, I know fishermen and fisherwomen have bad days, right? But they were fishing with nets, as they usually did, and they had caught nothing, absolutely nothing. And that's interesting too, because, and here's why it's interesting, at least to me. I don't know if it was interesting to you or not. So the fact that they had caught nothing, and they saw a person, okay, they weren't sure who it was, a person standing on the beach at the shore, and that person told them to do what? Cast their nets on the right-hand side of the boat. And the result was so many they difficult to handle, right? The nets were full, as so to speak, as they say. Later on, it's revealed that when they brought the net in, it had not broken apart as it had in the first time that they caught so many fish, because the first time they caught so many fish, of course, the net was starting to come apart. Now, do you think, here's my thought, okay? Here's my thought that, again, I believe very strongly in God's providence. I believe very strongly that He's orchestrating the affairs of His people. Okay? And my thought was they were unsuccessful because God didn't want them to be successful, because He wanted them to see that they don't belong back fishing. Okay? So He wanted them to, because otherwise, assuming that it was the left side of the boat that the net was on, why would there be so many more fish on the right side? Now, if you're out in a sea somewhere and there's fish around, usually it doesn't make any difference which side you're on. There's fish, around. So it's just interesting to me that by putting the net on the other side of the boat, they were filled with plenty of fish. In fact, they had so many. John's account in the 21st chapter says that they caught how many? Isn't it interesting that he count? I guess he counted them. I don't know. 153, and they were large fish. Okay, they were large fish. Why would he be? And this is not a typical number that you see in the Bible. It's kind of just kind of unique or odd. 153. Well, why did John want to make a point of telling us exactly how many fish they caught? What do you think? What's that? Yeah, but why specifically 153? I mean, why did a lot of times in the Bible they'll just round it up and they'll say, well, about 100, okay, or about 150. But this was very specific, 153. I think John wanted to make sure that we understood that his being an eyewitness, he was very specific about what he reported that he saw. And the second thing was that perhaps, and this is related to fishermen's tales, right? Wanted to make sure that this was not just that people wouldn't just look at this account and say, "Oh, that's just a fisherman's tale." It didn't have all the fish, but when you get down to the specifics of counting how many fish you have, then it's hard to discount that. Okay, now. Why did they not know who the person on the shore or the beach was? Why do you think? Perhaps, okay, he was probably 100, I think the Bible says like 100, almost 100 yards away, okay? And what time of the day was it? What time? Daybreak, right. Daybreak the next morning, okay? Daybreak the next morning, so it's probably still a little bit dark, trying to see 100 yards when the sun is not, completely up, whatever. But once they realized who it was, and who was the first to recognize who it was? John, right? Okay. Now, so and then John told Peter, right? What did Peter do? Yeah, he put his outer garment back on. Put his outer garment back on. Now, here's what he did next. Impetuous Peter, right? He puts his outer garment back on. Now, probably because if he knew that was Jesus, he was being respectful to Jesus, but he had been prepared for work, obviously. But then he jumps into the water. Now, the garments that they used to wear on the outer garments, I mean, they were, they would soak in a lot of water. So impetuous Peter, he throws his outer garment back on, and what does he start doing? He starts swimming to the shore. How many of you have ever tried to swim 100 yards in a sea, or or a lake or whatever? You're 100 yards away and you're fully clothed. Yeah, not easy to do, is it? Not easy to do. So, at any rate, Peter jumps into the sea and begins swimming to the shore to meet with Jesus. What did the other disciples do? What did the other apostles do? What did they do? Yeah. Now, there's some debate about whether or not it was the original boat that they had been fishing out of, or like a lot of fishing boats do, they always drag another smaller boat behind in case there's some trouble with the larger boat. Whether they got into the smaller boat and came at any rate, however, whatever boat they were in, and they were dragging the net to the shore. Now, considering that the Bible describes it as so full that it was difficult to handle, you can imagine if they're all rowing that boat, how difficult it was to drag those nets all the way to the shore. But nevertheless, that's what they did. And of course, Peter went after they got to the shore. Peter went and hauled in the net. And what was also okay? Here's the other thing too. When they got to the shore, what did they see? When they got to the shore, what did they see? A fire. Who had started the fire? Who had started the fire? Jesus. Okay, assuming he started it, right? But what was remarkable about what was on that fire? There was already fish and bread. And then what did Jesus say? Give me some of your fish. Well, where did he get the fish? Okay, where did he get the fish? Um, Nothing is beyond Jesus' capability. Okay, so that was very remarkable about that particular event. And so this is the third appearance that Jesus has made to his disciples. John 21:14. Then there's two situations that Jesus is involved in talking to his disciples. First, he was talking to Peter. First, he talked to Peter. And what was the discussion generally about between Jesus and Peter? Jesus kept asking him, "Do you love me?" Okay? Well, actually, he asked him 3 times. Okay? The first 2 times when Jesus asked Peter, what form of love was Jesus talking about? What does the Greek language reveal was remember in the Greek language, there's, where we say one love, and we have to kind of demonstrate what we mean by love, or we have to uh, qualify sometimes what kind of love we're talking
Hey,
about.
good
In the
morning.
Greek language, there are different words for love that describe or that denote a particular kind of love. Okay? So what was the love, the term that Jesus used the first 2 times when he asked Peter? Agape, okay? Agape love, okay? What does that form of love entail? How high on the love, if you talk about just putting a ladder, so to speak, of all the different forms of love, where is agape love? The greatest love, because it's about others, not about yourself, it's about others, okay? And he asked him twice. Peter responded, however, with a different form of love. What form of love did Peter respond with? Phileo. And phileo means, what form of love is that? It's an affection, right? An affection or a friendship, okay? So when Jesus asked him, "Do you love me?" meaning, do you really intimately love me with your very being, okay? And Peter answered him as though he was saying, "Yes, Father, yes, Jesus, I'm your friend, okay? I'm a friend." And so each time, however, Jesus would respond to Peter's response by saying something about his lambs and his sheep. He would either say, "Tend my sheep," or "Shepherd my sheep," "Feed my sheep." Lambs, he started out with saying lambs. Remember that Jesus' disciples would have been in their infancy at this time, okay? Just as the church was in its soon to be in its infancy. Then the third time when Jesus asked Peter, what form of love did he ask Peter about? What form of love did he use this time? Phileo, okay? Phileo. And of course, Peter's response this time was not to just come back and say, I love you. It was to say what? Jesus, what? You know everything. So you know I love you. There's speculation about why Jesus asked him 3 different times, that perhaps he did it 3 times, which would account for the 3 times that Peter denied him. Although, we don't know for sure. But certainly it would seem to indicate that this was Jesus telling Peter, or welcoming him back into full apostleship, so to speak, or full discipleship. But keep in mind, however, that we don't know what happened on their first appearance. Okay, the first time he now whether and no doubt that was also an intimate discussion between Jesus and Peter. Perhaps it was some kind of rebuke, or why did you do this, or whatever, to get Peter to voice for himself why he did it. Obviously, Jesus would know why he did it. But the point being is that, excuse me, is that this kind of indicates here that Jesus was restoring Peter back to his original state in the good graces of Jesus. And what was the implication, or what would become the implication of Jesus saying, "Shepherd my sheep," or "Feed my sheep, care for my lambs"? The head of Peter served. If you look in 1 Peter, I think it's the 5th chapter, it tells you that Peter said, when he was talking to the elders there, okay, he said, "As a fellow elder," okay. So we know from that Peter himself served as an elder in one of the congregations that had been established. But in a general sense, the apostles, because of the infancy of the church, once it's established, they were generally had to be the shepherds to all of the churches until such time as each of those local churches could set up for themselves the organization that the Lord had prescribed for the church, in that each of them be led by shepherds. So before that could occur, that means that the apostles, in a general sense, in a general way, served as the shepherds for all of the churches in their infancy. Even though later it's revealed to us, of course, that there were elders appointed in the local churches, and Peter himself served as a fellow elder in a local church. But here's the important thing. About Jesus' discussion with Peter. Basically, when Jesus said, "Do you love me more than these?" there's 2 possibilities. Okay? There's 2 possibilities that he was talking about. We're not sure which one. Okay? One would be that he was talking about the other disciples, the other apostles. The second thing would have been the fish and all of his tools of trade, so to speak. Okay? Regardless of which was meant there, okay? Regardless of what was meant there, what was Jesus basically asking Peter when he kept asking him, "Do you love me?" And he said, "More than these." What was the implication of him saying "more than these"? Absolutely. Okay. Basically, what Jesus was asking Peter is, do you love me more than anything else or anybody else in this world? Because that's what it would take, of course, for the apostles and the disciples to move forward after Jesus was done, because they were going to face some really, really tough times. And it was important that Jesus convinced Peter himself, let Peter convince himself that he loved Jesus so much that he would be willing to face whatever he had to face moving forward. Charles. Yeah, and I think, well, because we don't know what happened on the first time, I think really, I think the real strong implication is that he wanted Peter to convince himself, because he had denied him, and because of, again, we don't know what the first discussion was about. But you're absolutely right. It could be either one of those, and it's probably a combination of both. Okay, but Peter needed to be convinced himself that he loved Jesus so much that he was going to do whatever it took moving forward, and he was going to love Jesus, and subsequently the word that he was going to preach, no matter what the consequences were, he was going to keep moving forward. Okay? So that's the initial discussion between Peter and Jesus. Okay? Any questions or clarification on that? Other points? Okay, so then there comes a third person into the mix, so to speak, the discussion. Okay, because now it's Jesus, Peter, and John. Right now, apparently Jesus and Peter had moved away from the rest of the apostles and having this very intimate, this very personal conversation between the two of them. Okay, but now we know that John was now, whether he had, come up and joined them, or as they were walking away, John had joined them or whatever. Here's the point about it. What was the discussion between Jesus and Peter regarding John?
Good morning.
Okay, uh, so what was after Jesus affirmed that Peter loved him? What was the next thing he told him? What was the next thing he told him? What's that? How he was going to die, and what was he indicating as to how he was going to die? Yeah. Remember that Jesus was bound, okay? And he said, you're going to be bound. He said, when you were a youngster, you girded yourself up and you went wherever you wanted to go, okay? You chose where you wanted to go, right? He said, but the time's going to come when you're older that someone else is going to bind you and they're going to take you where you don't wish to go. Okay? So clearly indicating to Peter just how difficult just exactly what was going to happen to him in the future. Again, the significance of that is that Peter was going to be a martyr for Jesus. And we know from, historical tradition, not inspired word, but from uninspired word, but we trust historical, valid historical documents, just like we do about our own country or whatever, is that about 34 years later, Peter was crucified, just as the Lord was. But what was different between the two crucifixions? Yeah. Apparently, Peter asked to be crucified upside down rather than upright. Why? Right, right. He didn't think he was worthy to be crucified in the same manner that Jesus was. And so the sort of the prophecy, I guess you could call it, of Jesus about his death occurred about 34 years after this discussion was was taking place. Okay, but as they were, and then Jesus asked him to do what? Jesus asked him to do what? Follow him. Okay, follow him. So they start walking away, right? And what is Peter's response? What's Peter's response? Yeah, how about the other one behind us, right? And of course, it was John, right? And what was Jesus' response? Yeah, yeah. He basically rebuked him very mildly, but he rebuked him. Says, if what's it to you if I leave him alive until I come? Now, Peter probably thought that he was talking about that John was never going to die. In fact, it appears from historical records that that's the rumor that was getting around, is that John was never going to die. But of course, we know he did. But what was different about John's death than the other apostles? It was all natural causes. Okay, and remember, John was an old man when he died because he was about 90 years old when he wrote his gospel. Okay, so no doubt he lived a good life. Yes,
Amen. Good morning.
that's okay.
It's great to see each and every one of you here again as we come together and worship our God. I say this every week, and I'll say it again. There's no better place to be.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So he was making it clear to all of those, that was there. He continued. He had told them before they were going to have a tough time, and he just continues to emphasize how tough it is going to do. But basically, he told Peter, don't worry about other people. Worry about yourself. And of course, in talking to Peter, he could be saying that to us too, because sometimes we get wrapped up in worrying about what others are doing instead of what we need to be doing. And so that's basically what that response was about. Okay? And of course, John, in getting toward the end of his gospel account, the 21st chapter and around about 24, he was affirming to those that would read his gospel or would hear his gospel that he was an eyewitness to all of these things. Okay. Now, it's also true that he said that there were lots of other things that happened during the life of Christ but he was specifically, especially, an eyewitness to the post-resurrection events, so that folks would know that he was himself an eyewitness, and he could be believed because he was given his personal account of all these things. Okay? Any final comments or thoughts about this seventh appearance? Okay. Um, so on Sunday we will do. Now Matt, of course, covered the eighth appearance because that was when Jesus instituted the Great Commission. Okay, Matt covered that in his sermon on Sunday. So last Sunday, on this Sunday, we will get into the final appearances, which would be appearances 9 and 10, because it appears that over the 40 days that Jesus did appear, about 10 times in the span of that 40 days, and of course, he appeared more than once to some. Okay, just as here again, this is the third time that he's appeared to his disciples. Is he going to appear to his disciples again? Say again? Yes, and what's going to take place after he appears to them for the final time? Jesus will be ascended, and he will go to the Father this time. Remember, he didn't go to the Father last time, but he goes to the Father in his after his final appearance to the disciples, and then the ascension will be covered by Matt in his sermon on Sunday, and then we will wrap up the Life of Christ study on Wednesday the 16th. Okay? Jason and Charles will also be here. What we thought we might do is, if you want to revisit anything, I know it's been a long time we've been on this, but there may be something, especially recently, that you want to revisit, or if you want to ask some questions or whatever, all three of us will be here. It's about something that Charles said in one of his lessons, or Jason, or I said, or we can revisit, or we can deal with it in a general way if we need to. Okay, so that'll be on Wednesday the 16th. So it'll be a final wrap up, and then on Sunday the 20th, Charles will begin our study in Acts. Did everybody get a book on Acts? Because I have them in they're right back there. So is there anyone who did not get a book for the Sunday morning Bible study, Bible class? And then on Wednesday night, Matt will come in on the 23rd and start teaching the book of Hebrews. Did anybody have any problem with any of the questions? These were probably the easiest to answer because they were almost straightforward out of the accounts that we studied. Okay, great. Thank you very much for all of your comments. Okay, Jack.